Alexa, stop. That was probably too much. That's all it takes. That's all it takes is a few songs. Get your video copyrighted or saying something about. I'm. How about I don't? How about I just don't post this to YouTube? Because if you even mention COVID or I don't know the election, let me make this perfectly clear. Obviously, and this is just so depressing. The 2020 election that put Biden in power was a free and fair election. There were honest Republicans who observed the election and saw no significant voter fraud. And when I say no significant, I mean we're not talking about thousands or tens of thousands examples of people voting who weren't supposed to or voting twice. We're talking about maybe a handful, a dozen. So that's what's meant by no significant. Nothing that would affect the outcome of an election. For the record, I voted for Biden. He's a moderate. I thought he would be fine. I think he was. I think he's too old now. Hopefully I can't get banned for saying that. I mean, they talk about a threat to democracy, but this is the way I look at it. When you force two senile old men and say that that's your choice for democracy, I feel you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I mean, obviously I'm not going to vote for Trump, but telling me I have to vote for Biden to save democracy is like sticking a gun to my head and said, vote the way I want you to vote or you're going to be voting against democracy. It's wrong. All right. COVID was not a hoax. It was a real thing. Millions of people died. Hopefully I won't get banned for saying that. I mean, if I put this video up on YouTube, they ban me simply for mentioning COVID. And they put a little warning, science, blah, blah, blah. I'm pro-science. I like Anthony Fauci. I feel bad that he's threatened. He got his life threatened trying to save our lives. This whole thing about him sponsoring some thing in China with monkeys to create a virus to kill Americans. I mean, it's patently absurd that he would do that. He's a kindly old guy that was appointed by Reagan. Why would they do that? This whole conspiracy is infuriating because it's stupid people. It's Dunning-Kruger. It's stupid people thinking that they actually have a talent for reasoning, and they don't. They should. I hate to say it. I'm not a populist. I'm an elitist. I really am. I think I am an elitist because I think stupid people should just shut up and listen to the smart people. And of course, smart people have ulterior. Look at this. I've got this diabetic thing in my skull. You want to look at it? You probably don't. That's gross. I'm sorry. People have motives. I don't think there's some evil motive amongst smart people. Can be evil too. Dumb people can be evil. Both can have ulterior self-interest motives. But I think a lot of people, being smart and being scientific doesn't mean that you're automatically altruistic. I will accept that. Doesn't necessarily make you altruistic. Simply because you're smart and you know about science, you still might have an angle. I mean, everybody does. I mean, it's part of the capitalist system to want to get rich and to want to make money. And all of a sudden, if you're a scientist or you're a pharmaceutical company, there's something wrong with that. Now, the Sackler family, does that mean that they did the right thing? No, they obviously were getting the whole nation hooked on drugs, and they should be arrested. They should be lined up against the wall and shot. Now, does that mean that every pharmaceutical company, every drug they make is poison, or that they've got some ulterior motive to get us hooked? No, obviously not. Obviously, the vaccines were brought out rapidly, but they've been working on these things for a long time. And it's kind of unpatriotic because our technology is so much better than the Russians or the Chinese. Let me catch my breath. So, I think the vaccine saved lives. I've been vaccinated 5 times. You know, I'm just going to put this up on YouTube to piss YouTube off because I'm sick of it. I'm Jimmy. I mean, I go to Jimmy Dore and he's or that Kennedy guy, and they're vaccine conspiracy theorists, and they're allowed to post. What's the game here? I don't get what Google. Well, it was YouTube Google? Well, they all seem to be owned. That's kind of conspiratorial too. But see, that's the thing. That's the thing where I'm going to tell you right now. These multi-billionaires have too much control over the system. They've got it monopolized. Like if you look at when automobiles first came out, Henry Ford's automobile never almost came out because there was a monopoly, and Henry Ford's car was too good, so they said, it's not safe enough. It doesn't meet our standards. It's violation of a patent, and they tried to stop him, not because his car wasn't any good, but because it was too good. Same thing with Tucker. They didn't want the competition, so that's anti-free enterprise to have a monopoly like. That's why we had antitrust laws. Not to have the government take things over, but to make sure the little guy has a chance to come up. Because they're people, everybody started out little. Henry Ford started in his garage, didn't he? So did that Mercedes-Benz guy. Daimler Benz, Fred Benz, Helmut Benz. Actually, if you look at the Mercedes-Benz, he was ready to give up. He'd been tinkering with that thing, and he was doing a lot of good work. But his wife was getting a little frustrated because they were going into debt. And all of a sudden, you got this man who's sitting grumpy at the table, crying in his beer, saying that he's done all this work, and it's come to nothing, and he's wasted half her fortune. And she was rich. I don't know what her name is. Mercedes. Oh, Mercedes. Was Mercedes the name of his daughter or his wife? I think it was the name of his daughter. But that's a pretty name, Mercedes. But that's where the name Mercedes came from. So Mercedes' mom, Mrs. Benz, was thinking, "You bum! You've been out there in the garage with this toy, basically, wasting all my money, and now you're telling me you can't make it work because there's no gasoline station." At the time, if you wanted benzene, if you wanted gasoline, you had to go to an apothecary, and you had to buy it because gasoline was basically used to clean your silver. It was a cleaning solution, and they didn't sell a lot of it. So you had to find a route from apothecary to apothecary because there were no gasoline stations. So Mrs. Benz is getting really pissed because he doesn't have a regular job. He's a bit of a deadbeat, wasting all of her fortune that she inherited from her dad or whatever. And she's looking at this thing, and she says, "Does it even run?" And he puts it around around the cobblestones around their little cottage or whatever. And she says, "It runs. What's wrong with this thing?" He says, "I've taken it places. Nobody wants this thing. Nobody's paying any attention. They just think it's a toy." So she says, "Okay, fill it up with gasoline. We're going to go on a route." And she gets in this thing and she says, "How does this thing work? Make it work." And they're going along and she's going, "Hey, hey, hey, hey." And they're going like, "Show us your tits." And she says, "No, no, no. I want you to look at the car." And they're saying, "Well, did you invent this?" And I go, "No, my husband did. And he spent all my fortune on it. And now I'm really angry at him. But look at this. Look at the car. Look at the car. Keep your eyes on the car. Look at the car. Okay? Okay? You think just because I'm a woman, I can't do anything?" This is what she did. I mean, she didn't invent it. She couldn't even drive it. But what she put the money up for it. And then she realized, she had the good sense to know, he's wasted. He's wasted my fortune. She gets in the car. They drive it around. It's putting around on this little route. And she's like, I don't know, what did they have back then? Morse code? They have those wireless calls. You can't call the newspapers because there aren't telephones. Did you write a letter? It was like, I guess it was just like word of mouth, or I guess they had telegraph back then. "Hey, look, there's this crazy lady in a car that her deadbeat husband made, and it's a car. We don't even know what a car is. I mean, I've heard about these automobile things, but it's a horseless car. There's no horses, and it's putting along, and it's running along, and then it runs out of gas. I don't even know what gas is." And they go to the apothecary, and they fill it up with stuff we use to clean our silver, and it's pretty neat. So what did Mrs. Benz do? Mrs. Benz is the reason we have automobiles. She didn't invent it. She couldn't even drive it. She couldn't even stand to be around the fumes of the damn thing. But when her husband gave up and decided that he'd wasted his time and he was going to spend the rest of his life sitting in front of the television set watching football. I don't even know if football had been invented, and I know there was no TV. What did men do back then when they'd given up on life? Did they have welfare? I think they just invented it, Bismarck. But
had to actually pay into it. So okay, he was ready to give up. I guess men gambled. They went down to the bar and they gambled, or they went to the horse races. I guess that was something that a loser did when he'd given up on life. He's just gambling. So but I don't think he was. But I mean, he wasn't. He was like one of these nerdy inventor guys, and don't think he had social skills, and he invented the thing, but he had no way to sell it. Had absolutely no idea how to sell it. And his wife had very little scientific knowledge or inclination, and it was noisy. Women didn't like cars because they smelled and they were dirty and they were hard to start. That's why electric cars did so well with females. You just turn a little switch and they rode. But cars, I think there were laws that women weren't even allowed to drive because they were afraid. It was hard to start a car. You had to have a starter, and I mean, this is just, I'm not being sexist. Most women didn't have the upper body strength to crank that crank. There were some, and there were men that would, but starting an automobile was a really, really hard thing. It wasn't until the advent of the electric starter that automobiles became more egalitarian. Little old ladies could start a car. Um, Old men could start a car. Big, strong, in the prime of their life men would break their collarbones or break their jaw. Getting a car to start with those cranks, you think, how hard could it be? It was hard. Those cranks were not convenient things to do. That's why there were a lot of electric cars in New York for women. It was because you just flick a switch and you didn't have to get dirty. You didn't have to stick your. I mean, I know it sounds sexist, but women at the time was very important for them to be clean and not get filth on their nice, Sunday go to meeting dress. I mean, when they were working, they were, food was flying everywhere. I don't know. I think it was before the vacuum cleaner. So I mean, they had household things, but once you got your chores done, you wanted to be clean, and the last thing you wanted to do when you were all dressed up and ready to go to market was to start fiddling with some filthy internal combustion engine and have oil and gasoline splash over your nice clothes. That was something a man liked. Men liked to get dirty and play with with gears and grease. That was a guy thing. I'm sure there were tomboys that liked that. But Mrs. Benz, that was not her thing. But what Mrs. Benz did that was so very important to commerce and to invention was this idea, kind of like what Thomas Edison did, this idea that he was just ready to chuck because he'd had it. Nobody was paying any attention to what he was doing. You know what? Maybe this is long enough. I'll do another one.